All right. So I moved to Boston in 2009 to start my PhD work. Um, I was swept away when I met my advisor doing something new and groundbreaking in the field of infectious disease. And I'd never worked quite at this level in a wet lab. I came from math and mathematical modeling. And I thought I was going to work on cancer and modeling dynamic cancer systems in silico. But I am a risk taker at heart, and I completely changed fields, and I started working on a severe form of the malaria parasite that affects pregnant women and children. It's responsible for the majority of the deaths that afflict young kids in their first infections. And so my day-to-day looked a lot like the photo on the bottom right there, working in biosafety level 2 laboratory, looking at images of the malaria parasite. It's the smaller dots inside stained red blood cells here on the bottom left. These larger ones are immune cells here. And part of my work was to build a team to help me succeed in my PhD work. I was working with in an infectious disease lab with a microfluidics specialist who was in, I think, in the EE laboratory, so that we could come up with a new way to target very rare, very variable mutant proteins that are on the surface of these malaria-infected red blood cells. And it was that team that made me successful in producing some new basically an RNA version of an antibody, we call them aptamers, to target this very severe form of the parasite. I graduated in 2015, defended my PhD, and we published our work. And that kind of began my career as a communicator, something that I did when I left MIT. I taught at the University of California, Riverside for a little while, and then also at Caltech. And I have a real passion for sharing science, for sharing the process of design, building, and testing. But I also wanted to shout out to MIT Cycling. It's a club. I don't know if any of our listeners have had a chance to participate with the MIT Cycling Club. But I joined because when I moved to Boston, I didn't have a car. I had an old bike, and I wanted a way to get around town, explore the city, and also stay fit. And you probably know that MIT has a wind tunnel. And so it lends itself really well to engineers that like to optimize. So we got into the wind tunnel, looked at our aerodynamics, our position, and it made training with other like-minded engineers really fun and successful. And I was able to race at several national championships while I was doing my PhD. And I think this photo, I think in the background here, that's not a rock. I think that's snow. And this is somewhere in New England. And I'm suspicious that it might be one of our races in New York. I was trying to find a photo from there. And I think it is because I was a part of this very high performing team, even at the collegiate level, that I was able to climb through the cycling ranks and race internationally. So after I graduated with my PhD, I pursued cycling full-time, teaching on the side, and it let me travel to Europe, places like Bremen, Germany, to race on a velodrome. This is what you're looking at here, is this sort of Pringles chip oval. This one is a slightly shorter oval. I think it's about 200 meters around, and the banking is 53 degrees. So there's a minimum speed limit that we race on tracks like these, usually around 18, 19 miles an hour, depending on how steep the banking. And I specialized in 2 races, again, that had to do with working together as a team. One is the Madison, where you're actually doing hand slings, like the photo on the right, with your partner, to transfer your momentum as they join the race and you drift up to the railing to take a breather. And this goes back and forth every time you catch each other. And the other race I did, which I got my start at MIT cycling. In that club is the team pursuit, where you're riding from a dead stop up to probably a max sustained speed of about 40 miles an hour for 4 kilometers, trying to go as fast as you can, about 12 inches from the wheel in front of you. And this was another place where this MIT mentality of designing up here a position, you can see our positions on the bike are very different. Changing technology, these bikes have a left side drive. You go out into your garage later tonight and you look, you'll see all of your bikes, the drivetrain, the chain and the cogs are all on the right-hand side, but because we turn left on the track, there are marginal gains to be had for reduced drag by putting that whole assembly on the left, kind of leaning into the wind and putting a nice cover on it. This is all tested in wind tunnels. You can see our positions, our aerodynamic helmets, and track cycling is really an engineer's sport. It is tiny performance gains and lots of math. I call it you're playing chess at your VO2 max. And I had the opportunity to represent the United States on Team USA at multiple World Cups, World Championships, and I really do believe that this element, this team element, this tactical, technical sport combined with this build test paradigm that I had in my PhD research, those two things together, parts of my MIT roots, are what gave me an opening into the astronaut corps. And so like Jim said, I joined the Corps in 2022. I was applying in 2021. And if we can remember that far back, that was right as COVID was hitting. And so I had done my last race in 2019. I was waiting for Olympic selection to Tokyo. I'd qualified, but I wasn't sure if I was going to race on the team. And I had thrown in my hat to join the next astronaut class. And COVID canceled the Olympics. They were delayed, and so was the astronaut selection. And so it was one of the hardest periods of my life, was sitting with all of this uncertainty for a long period of time. But I went back to my MIT friends. I reconnected with a lot of MIT cycling teammates, and that gave me some stability through that period. And I was very lucky to have been selected. I joined the 23rd astronaut class, and I'm joined by 9 other incredible Americans here, some of which also have MIT connections. Chris Williams, here in the middle, MIT alum. He's currently on board the International Space Station doing his first mission. Marcos Barrios also has MIT history. Another fun anecdote about being in the astronaut corps is you are given a name by the class before you. And so the class before us is called the Turtles, and they lovingly called us the Flies. And they say because they hoped we would fly soon, although there may have been some less kind reasons for giving us the Flies. But you can see this is our class patch on the top left, where we have the shape of a fly and an astronaut reaching towards the moon with an eye on Mars. That sort of symbolizes the training that we do in our astronaut candidacy, and also the development work that we continue to do once we are part of the Corps. And so I have a little bit of a different background than some of the others in the astronaut corps. I wasn't sure that I wanted to be an astronaut since I was 6, 7 years old. It's something that fit with that explorer, boundary pushing mentality that we cultivate at MIT, trying to push the bubble of what we know, trying to push the bounds of our human performance, of what the human mind can sustain. So I want to pivot a little bit and explain what we are training for right now. Right?
Chris,
Yeah.
Jim Boyd has a quick question for you. Jim, go ahead.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Chris, you mentioned that you applied to the astronaut training program. And so tell a little bit about that. Like, can I apply? Or were you recruited? How does that work?
Yeah, the sort of funny answer to that is that you apply online at usajobs.gov, as if for any other government position. It's posted about once every 4 years, and the qualifications required are changing. I think for our class, we were the first class that required an advanced degree, so a master's or above in some engineering discipline. Um, there's a variety of pathways that you can apply to the Corps through. Some are tailored more for specialty skills like pilots and test pilots. They're looking for 500, 1,000 hours in particular types of flight environments. You can apply as an engineer, which is probably the most competitive bucket we receive. A lot of applications through engineering. There's biological, biomed type applicants, which is what I applied through. Doctors, medical doctors are needed in the Corps. Their expertise is needed. And so you'd kind of match that. It starts off with just an online application. You kind of upload your resume, answer a couple of very brief prompts. And then if you're selected past that point, you go through a few rounds of interviews where they actually bring you on site to the Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas. Texas is where I live now. And you spend between 3 and 5 days on site interacting with other astronauts, performing certain selection tasks that I cannot go into detail about. But the selection weekends and weeks was some of the most fun I have had. Certainly the most fun job interview I've ever had.
Very good.
Yeah, good question. So we actually just hired the most recent class. They joined in August, 10 individuals. It's the first class we've had that had more women than men. There's six women were hired and 4 men. And so we expect roughly about that cadence, about once every 4 years that the application cycle opens, and people usually apply multiple times. And so when you join the Corps, you have a couple of years of basic training. And what we're training for is currently a trip to this beautiful destination here. This is the International Space Station, viewed from an approaching crew vehicle. You can see, just this gorgeous crystal clear view of our Earth. The curvature of the Earth is visible from the altitude of 250 miles, give or take, that the ISS, International Space Station, flies at. One of my favorite things to do is actually watch it fly overhead. So I use the Spot the Station app that tells me when, for whatever location I'm at, the ISS is going to be flying overhead. And it is a pretty incredible thing to look up at this quickly moving satellite and realize that right now there are 7 souls on board. It's pretty awesome. This is what it looks like, the International Space Station. It has this cross structure. The horizontal cross is the external truss from which most of the hardware is anchored or deployed from. You can see there's very large solar arrays that are going into and out of the page. 2 here on the port side, 2 here on the starboard side. These large elements pointing aft are the radiators. There's actually one on this, I believe it's on the port side. Maybe here, if you can see my pointer, is what I'm guessing. That actually has sustained a little bit of micrometeoroid damage, and it is lovingly called by the ground teams as Flappy. And then along this vertical axis for the picture, you're looking from zenith down nadir towards the Earth. Forward, we're flying this direction. This is the pressurized segment here. This is all the pressurized volume. The forward end is what we call the US operating segment. the aft end is the Russian operating segment. And the internal volume is about a 5 to 6 bedroom house, but it is absolutely chock full of science experiments, stowage, all of those Christmas decorations that you get down once a year that has to live up there because it's so costly to bring things into low Earth orbit. One of my favorite places, and I know one of my friends and colleagues' favorite places in the International Space Station is the cupola. And that is our viewing port through which we observe our beautiful Earth. So here is my friend Josh Cassada looking out one of those windows. And actually, this doesn't bother him if we think about him right side up or upside down, because obviously in space, in microgravity, you are able to use all 3 dimensions of that volume as you like. And so it feels a lot larger, more spacious than, say a 3-dimensional mock-up here on the ground we use for our training. And so astronauts love to spend a lot of time in the cupola, taking photos, observing, making scientific observations of our Earth. This is my friend Don Pettit, who's had 4 flights to station, excellent photographer. You might take a look at water levels in one of the lakes here in Arizona outside my hometown. Or perhaps if you wanted to look a little bit more outward into our galaxy, you might head over to the front of station here and pop into the Crew Dragon and look at one of its windows going forward. And if you guys can find the astronaut in this photo, it gives you a little bit of a sense of scale of how big or how small, depending on your perspective, station is. So this picture is actually taken by a recent astronaut who is EVA, so performing an external vehicular activity. They've climbed out on that unpressurized truss, and they're looking forward at astronaut Sonny Williams up here, who's doing some maintenance on one of the reflectors that Dragon uses in its approach. And so if you can see my cursor, that is her in the center of the picture. But this is the view you might see out of Dragon's front window. It's incredible when you remove the haze and the particles of our horizon, how crisp and clear the stars look of our Milky Way. In this photo, you can also see a little bit of the aurora, and it's just been an incredible season for the aurora, that's for sure. We can also look out and see other interstellar visitors, like here's the Atlas Comet. I think that this photo is taken about October 2024. And here's Dragon kind of down on the far center right, and the Canadarm here, which is grounded on one of the living modules. This is node 2. It's where the crew sleep. And it has mirrored ends, and it has this end effector that can grapple onto grapple fixtures at various parts of the station, walk itself around to perform maintenance. We use it to capture visiting cargo vehicles. So it's a common photo bomber in some of these beautiful photos of our galaxy. And just as beautiful as our Earth-facing images are during the day, the nighttime ones are also incredible. You can see all of the cities passing underneath station as you fly through. And like I mentioned, the aurora are just incredible. This is a picture of the aurora, but 2 Russian spacecraft are in your field of view. One is the Soyuz that the crew fly up on. Three crew depart from Kazakhstan and dock to station here. And they also have a Progress, which is a similar vehicle that brings up provisions, extra propulsion, fuel and oxidizer, food, oxygen, things like that. And so one of my recent jobs was to support the crew that was flying in orbit as sort of their unfortunate crew member left on the ground. We call it the increment lead. So for the duration of their stay, I am the person that represents them in all meetings and all operational decisions about how we're going to spend their time on station, what the priorities are, if we need to do a spacewalk, etc. And so this is shown right after this crew in blue flight suits arrived. So we have 11 folks in this part of the front part of station, and this is in a node where we have the largest cross-sectional area. So it gives you a sense of scale of how small station is. This is its largest width. And it has a lot of clutter. So this is actually, if I floated 2 steps backward from where that last picture was taken, this is astronaut Nick Hague, who recently finished his mission. He's working in node 2, which is that habitable volume that the Canadarm was poised on. And you can just see how it's a little bit of a controlled chaos inside of the space station. One of the things I'm really excited for my mission is going to be doing a lot of science on board. And you can see Nick here, he himself is working on some scientific experiment. I believe this is an incubator for a particular type of algae. But you notice this headband. Nick is also the experiment. So Nick is signed up for some science that is tracking his temperature, his heart rate, and monitoring other factors throughout the duration of his 6-month plus or minus mission. Because it's very important for us to learn how to live in space for long durations so we can mitigate things like bone loss, cardiovascular fitness loss, reduce the risk of clots. Because of the data we've been able to gather on station, for example, we have a portable ultrasound that we use to look at carotid artery. We look at the back of the eye. We've been able to identify certain afflictions like flattening of the back of the eye that happen when we're in space. And some of these things we don't actually have answers to. And so every astronaut that flies, we are gathering more and more data. And I think one of the other things I want to point out here is that I love about this picture is behind Nick, you can see that there's a screen and above him is a projector. And so some crews will actually have a Friday night movie viewing session to regain a little bit of normalcy, keep a routine, which is really important when you're traveling around the world at 17,500 miles an hour. And we live in this floating home for 6 to 12 months, depending on the mission. And like any homeowner knows, something's always breaking, something always requires maintenance. And so to do that here, we do spacewalks. This is Sunny Williams again, exiting the airlock, which is kind of at an angle in this picture, about to set out for about a 6.5-hour EVA. And the person taking the photo is, I believe, in the cupola. You have to I'm orienting myself. Now this might be taken actually from one of our external cameras on the lower side of the truss. But we always go out in pairs for safety, and also because a lot of the things that we are working on they're very large and require a lot of hands. And so here's Sunny taking a selfie, also in space, in the vacuum of space, during the spacewalk. In that reflection, you can see she has a large set of tools in front of her at her chest here. This is a tether hook that we use to anchor ourselves to station while we're working at a local work site. She's holding a camera that has a thermal protection on it. Her gloves have a wrist mirror on it that lets her look at herself or behind her or at her various helmet lights and equipment to assess their state. Also lets you look at the back of electrical connectors because when you're inside the spacesuit, your visibility is actually quite poor. And so in addition to those that are flying in space, there's an entire team of folks that are responsible for flying the spacecraft and making sure it's in a healthy state on the ground. And so this is actually the most recent photo I could find of mission control in Houston. This is from 2020 when we did our first crewed mission to station in a SpaceX Dragon. The people making the decisions in the room are off to here to the left. That's the flight directors. We've got 2 of them sitting console here. And always to their right, so we can bend their ear, are the capsule communicators or the capcoms. And we are the voices that are talking to the crew. So every single person in this room is responsible for a system or a task. It might be electrical, it might be cooling, it might be stowage, or how to perform in-flight maintenance on the vehicle to keep it healthy. They are all deep in the technical weeds. You can see on some of these monitors up front, we have procedures open, we've got views we're looking at in station. We have lots of telemetry coming in from the vehicle that these teams are assessing real time. And the CAPCOM, the capsule communicator, is listening to all of this conversation. And with the guidance of flight flight is setting priorities, we distill all that information into a packageable call, and we give that information to the crew. And so anytime you're listening to loops that are going from space to ground or vehicle to mission control, you're listening to usually an astronaut, but sometimes an engineer sitting in that CAPCOM position. So how do we train for all of this? How do we get ready to fly at a space station? Some of my favorite training is actually to fly in the T-38 Talon training jet that we have. It's pictured here. This is call sign NASA 967. And I believe 67, I think it's a 1970s jet. I have to look. The serial number gives us the age, but this is the same airframe that the Apollo astronauts flew in when they were preparing for their missions. We've obviously upgraded the cockpit. We have a lovely glass cockpit, lots of data. We've upgraded the engines we have incredible maintainers that keep these jets flying. But they let us work as a team. I'm sitting in the back of the jet here, flying with my classmate Luke, and we're working as a crew to handle a dynamic situation, usually under a lot of G loads. And we can use that to help us train for launch and entry. It's very fast paced. Communication has to be clear, crisp, and minimal in some of these phases of flight. And this is one of the best ways for us to really prepare for space flight, where fast, accurate decision making could mean life or death. And so I don't have an aviation background. I didn't come to NASA with any flight hours, but we have incredible instructor pilots that get us up to speed and get us ready to take on this very fast-paced, unforgiving trainer. And it's definitely made me a better crew member for it. What about for spacewalks? Here in Houston, we have the Neutral Buoyancy Laboratory. It's a giant pool and facility in which we have a mock-up of the outside of the space station. You can see the external truss component is horizontal across the picture here. The pressurized volume is down the middle of the picture. And actually off to the right, just off screen, is our lunar operations segment, where we actually have simulated lunar regolith, lunar soil, and we practice moving in some of the lunar suits we're developing. I have some pictures of that coming up. So we wear a trainer suit, which is very, very similar to what we wear on station, except instead of having our life support in a backpack, it runs out, our life support is maintained out these umbilicals that run out the backs of the suits. That's our comm, our cooling, and our oxygen. And so here, this is myself and one of my classmates going through training, getting lowered down into the pool, where we have a team of safety divers that will place either foam or tungsten weights at various parts of our body. You can see I've got weight packs around my ankles here that makes us neutrally buoyant in whatever point of the water column we're working in. And so it's the best space-like simulation we can have. Lets me stand in this boot plate, which I'm using to hold myself still while I'm going to do some R&R on a computer box that is failed out by our simulated battery area on part of the truss. But these divers are constantly working because as we move up and down through the water column, they have to make adjustments. And so we train in this suit as if we were doing a real spacewalk. We practice accurate, crisp comms, and the duration is about 6 hours. And all we have is a water drink bag, kind of like your Camelback, that sticks up. Our little mouthpiece is right in the middle here, kind of right by our microphones. Like I mentioned, we have the Canada arm, which is used for maintenance on station and also capturing visiting vehicles. And so we train in a simulator to capture some of those cargo vehicles. This is a simulator for the Northrop Grumman Cygnus, which brings up a lot of food, a lot of science. And this is a mock up of that beautiful cupola that we have. And I'm flying the Canada arm here with one hand controller for translation of the arm. In 3 dimensions and one hand controller for rotation in 3 dimensions. So I didn't play any video games growing up, and I feel like maybe that would have been an advantage here. And then, of course, part of our training is to communicate the importance of what we do at NASA, what's happening on these missions, what science is going on station. So I get to spend a lot of time talking to folks like this today and sharing what is going on. So this is a good break to take any questions.
Now that's what I thought I'd do. Everybody's been a little shy on questions, but if you have any, and in a minute, if nobody asks, I've got a couple that I got, but let's see what everybody else has.
Okay, great.
I suspect that they're typing like
Bob, I've got
crazy.
one if that's okay.
Mike, it's all.
Yeah. So Chris, what got you excited? What motivated you to apply for the astronaut program?
Yeah, good question. And it's a kind of an existential answer. I have always believed that I've always been looking for a good way to spend my life. I wanted to make a contribution that would help humanity. It's kind of why I ended up in the field of biological engineering. I wanted a direct impact on human health. But I've always been interested in pushing the boundaries. Can we do something new to reduce the number of deaths of malaria? Can we push the human body further and break world records, go faster than we have ever gone before? And what technological jumps are necessary for that? And so that same mentality of trying to spend my energy on worthwhile problems that are hard, that to me, human spaceflight is just the culmination of that. And one of the most noble endeavors I think humanity has ever embarked on, this completely open-ended quest of exploration in an incredibly unforgiving environment. And the job itself wasn't really on my radar as something that applied to me. I had this notion, I think, when I was young, that you had to be in the military to become an astronaut, which is completely false. And so when the application opened, someone nudged me towards it and said, "Hey, this seems like you. Like you should throw your hat in." And I thought, of course, like who doesn't like that idea of exploring off planet and doing things for the first time. But I think the best way I've heard it described is hard work buys you the lottery ticket, but you still have to win the lottery to get in. And I really feel that. I feel like I was the right time in my life. I had put together enough of these skills and pieces to be a good fit for the Corps.
We have a couple more questions.
Yeah.
Excuse me for interrupting. I'm going to have Carl. We can. Carl Brown, can you unmute and ask your question?
Sure. Chris, I really appreciate you spending time with us this evening.
Yeah, I'm going to stop sharing just so I can see faces.
Well, I don't know if you want to see mine. It's not nearly as pretty as yours, but I guess you'll suffer through it. What are your thoughts on the planned ultimate retirement of the ISS? And is there a planned successor for an equivalent type of floating, living, and laboratory? China has theirs, right? Is that spurring people to maybe question that what I understood to be the current plan?
Let me see if I can answer in reverse order. So let's see. Big picture, right? We're planning towards deorbiting ISS in 2030. NASA's goal is to continue to explore. We want to have an American presence. We need to have an American presence in low Earth orbit. But we really believe that commercial partners are going to rise and fill that gap. NASA's been doing it and leading the way and demonstrating technologies that are successful. And a lot of commercial companies are utilizing some of the work NASA's already done to develop their own low Earth orbit destinations. We call this, what's one of the programs that NASA is currently working and supporting is called COM-LEO, so commercial low Earth orbit destinations. You know, the first one that comes to mind is VAST. A former astronaut, Drew Feustel, is working for them as well, and they've made some pretty excellent progress. They're not the only ones out there that are developing American destinations in LEO. It's really important that NASA continues to push outward. We have spent a lot of time in LEO, the purpose of which was to learn about living in space for a long time so that we can go to the moon, so that we can go further. So in terms of the ending of the program, 2030 is on deck, but that already is an extension of what was initially discussed. And so per program, per NASA administrator direction, we might see that change either, you know, in either direction. But for now, like we train to be ready to fly to station. There's so much to be gained there still, while we are working concurrent paths then to get ready for our lunar missions as well.
We have a couple more questions, so I want to get to them and then let you get back to your back on schedule here. Susan Newton, you got a question for her? Susan, you still there?
Gotta unmute. In terms of the experiments that the astronauts do, does each astronaut, each crew member get a particular set of experiments, or does everybody get trained on everything? And how much interaction do they have with the scientists who put those experiments together?
Great question. The answer is we are trained more or less universally, sort of be Swiss Army knife astronauts. And so, you know, even though I've spent, a decade pipetting, I may not be the person who's doing the crystallography, crystal growth experiments on station. It might go to my crewmate. Whereas I might be doing some, in the past, I might have done some sort of flame chemistry experiment. One of the most beautiful things is we can enable the PIs of this research on the space to ground loops. So we have 4 different communication paths that we primarily use to talk to station. One our Russian colleagues use so they can speak Russian freely. One is our main operating loop. And then one of these tertiary or quaternary loops, we will have the actual scientists who spent years and years designing this experiment, trying to translate it from a normal 1G lab bench experiment, say, to microgravity, and they will be walking the astronaut through step by step. We'll set a camera up over our shoulder so they can watch what we're doing in real time. We have pretty good connectivity, and part of that is they are the experts, we are the operators, and it has taken so much of everyone's time and effort and dollars to get that science there. We astronauts feel very personally responsible for its success, and so we want as much good words, advice, etc., so to make sure that we execute the experiment correctly.
Okay, we have a few more questions here. And I promise you we'll get back.
That's great. I love the questions.
Okay, Tom Coffey, ask your question. I'm muting. Ask your question. Okay, it's short. I'll read it. It was, what was your experience getting used to microgravity? I don't think you've been up yet, but do you know?
That's correct. Yeah, so I have not yet flown. I hope to be assigned here relatively soon. However, so I I get neither seasick nor airsick, even when doing a lot of aerobatics. And so we can't really predict who's going to get space sick, but I just have a feeling karma is going to send it my way. And so I think it might take me, some of our crew members, it takes a week or two to have your vestibular system sort of accept the fact that there is no gravity pulling, giving you a down signal.
And just to shorten up a little bit, Aaron Singh, you have a question?
Hi, Chris. Yeah, I wanted to ask, how do astronauts talk to their family members? Do they have access to the internet where they could, say, just text them on iMessage, or is it something that they have to relay through maybe Houston?
Yeah, so we actually have great connectivity on station. We are able to access email. We can call our family members. We can call our friends on the phone. It actually sometimes is better service than if I'm just calling someone across the country. And all of that can be relatively private, and that's really important for mental health and happiness for a long duration mission. You can imagine being up there for 12 months away from your family, not able to return for operational reasons. And so that connectivity is really important for mission success and high performing astronauts.
One more question and then yeah, there we go. One more question and then we'll get back. Although Fred, you may want to be, this is different. Fred Khalil, you want to ask your question? No, I think we'll save that one for later. Why don't we let you get back to the talk so that we can stay semi.
All right. Well, I looked it up in the chat, and the question is, have you ever worried about the ship exploding? And I want to answer this one because the answer is not really, because I've seen the NASA engineering team, which is thousands of folks working on different parts of, say, a launch vehicle. Especially, I've been intimately involved in some of the Artemis return to the moon mission program side of things. I've worked on Orion, the pressurized spacecraft that'll take our crew there, and I've seen the teams that are working on that rocket, working on that system. The level of detail with which NASA knows its system, it's thought about failures, it's thought about contingencies. It's not just designed and built. We've gone through and tested individual elements. One of our crew responsibilities is to make sure that we have tested things appropriately. So I lean on my MIT training a lot to make sure I'm asking the right questions. I'm looking for the things I don't know. Where are knowledge gaps? Where are my biases coming in? And so it's seeing that process unfold at NASA for me has given me incredible confidence that when the right people say it's time to go fly, we're going to do so safely. This is an industry that is not without risk, and when we take that risk, we do so knowingly and properly. So well mitigated, understood, and calculated. Yeah, it's a good question.
I was worried about that a little bit. Okay, I think that why don't you continue? And there are a few more questions on there, but let's save them for the end so that we can give people a chance to hear what you plan to say.
Yeah, all right, I'm going to go back and share my screen. So what I want to talk about now is some of the development work that we're doing to go to this beautiful satellite of ours. And when I first put this up on the screen, it should look both familiar and different to you, because this is not an angle of the moon that we are normally used to seeing. If you are a moon gazer, you might recognize Tycho up here in the top right of the picture. But what you're starting to see here is towards the back half of the moon. This photo is taken from a satellite. And this darker side of the moon has a lot of impact cratering, which is telling us about the history of our solar system. There's a lot of interesting scientific questions that we want to ask about the moon, as it will help us inform us in our path towards further destinations like this beautiful planet here. And so part of our return to the moon has been unmanned, uncrewed, and we're about to get ready for a crewed mission back around the moon. And so this is a beautiful photo of the Space Launch System Orion rocket, Artemis 1, as it stood on the pad before its launch November in 2024. This is a colossal rocket, 8.8 million pounds of thrust. Just incredible. This is more than the Saturn V rockets that the Apollo astronauts rode to the moon. And part of that is because we're taking more mass, and we also want to go somewhere a little bit different. So all the Apollo astronauts landed on equatorial sites on our near face of the Earth. We're really interested in landing at the South Pole. Two main reasons. One is you start to get a little bit of the impact cratering history that is present on the back side of the moon, where the rock samples we could find there will tell us something really unique about the history of our solar system, the history of the moon itself. And also, my personal favorite reason is there's a lot of permanently shadowed regions inside the craters at these very acute sun angle locations on the moon, like the South Pole. And we know that there's water on the moon, and we believe that we will find it in these permanently shadowed regions because it's just so cold. And so these frozen volatiles, maybe it's water, maybe it's some other organic compounds. We want to go grab some samples and see what form those might take. To prepare for that type of mission, we study some of the best examples of meteor impact craters that we have on Earth. This is from my home state of Arizona. This is Meteor Crater, where we've gone and done geology training with professional impact scientists and geologists. And our understanding of these places, the terrain, what we're looking for, what scientific questions, what data we want to gather, all of that information informs us as operators when we're developing some of the new technologies that are going to be required for a lunar mission. My favorite of which is the suit. I love interfacing with hardware that allows the human to perform maximally in a challenging environment. And so this is one version, prototype of one of the lunar suits NASA's helping develop, called our Exploration EVA suit. And critically, what's different from our space station microgravity suit is that this has a lot more articulating joints. It has movable hips. You can get down, you can kneel down onto the ground to, say, collect a sample. It has much better visibility because the helmet bubble actually comes down a lot lower. It's a lot bigger than what we have on space station. And you need a lot of arm mobility. So the shoulders are actually pulled more forward than in our microgravity suits. So you could wield a rock hammer. You can use a rake to pick up a sample. And so thinking about some of the operational challenges that would prohibit science collection is one of the important things that we do in this design, build, development process. I also mentioned that we're interested in permanently shadow regions. And so part of the Neutral Buoyancy Lab has been dedicated to creating a lunar surface simulation underwater. Here's our safety divers, but instead of working on the space station, they're working in the lunar soil, the lunar regolith. And this is where we test out these suits, test out other tools we might use on the surface, such as a cart, where we might grab samples, the tools that we're using, like shovels, sample cases, sample collectors, how all of that is part of the system that we're going to bring back to the moon to do this science. There's a Xena, one of the astronauts currently on station, is testing out a rock hammer. Here's a scoop. You can see the umbilicals, same as we use for station, that supplies our comm, oxygen, and our cooling in this training environment. And then we have like some pretty accurate lunar mock-up, large scale rocks where we can simulate collecting a geological sample in that pool as well. And so as we go through and work on the surface part of our mission design and our concept of operations, we'll go and test them in the pool. But we have to do truly end-to-end testing, and we must do that with the human operator in the loop, as it were. And so one of the really fun things I got to do as part of this mission development was landing and recovery operations. So the Orion capsule, once it goes around the Earth, once it goes around the moon, is going to come back and land in the Pacific Ocean, and we need to be able to recover the astronauts that are in there. And so we will have crew members volunteer, like myself, to go out into the Pacific. We deploy this training mock-up of the capsule and practice egressing the capsule onto the front porch, which is what we call this inflation piece in the picture on the right. And so after a mission, you'd simulate getting rescued, hoisted by the Det-3 Navy folks that are supporting the mission, and going back to our to the boat where the medical doctors are waiting to assess the crew. And so all of this is in service for the Artemis 2 mission, which is launching as early as February of next year. It will be our first crewed test flight to the moon since Apollo, so over 50 years. And the trajectory will be launching out of Florida. I've lost my pointer here. Here we go. Launching out of Florida, raising our orbit into a high Earth orbit so that we can do a 24-hour checkout period of the spacecraft. It's life support systems that didn't exist on Artemis 1, which was the uncrewed mission. It's going to separate from a secondary engine element on part of this trajectory and practice maneuvers and handling qualities in space. That's a test objective because if we are going to go down to the lunar surface, we're going to need to rendezvous and dock with a lunar lander. And so this will practice the handling qualities of the Orion vehicle, which holds the crew. Then when we come back around after that 24 hours, we'll get to a close approach of the Earth, burn our translunar injection, which is our burn to go to the moon. And we will do a free return trajectory, about 30,500 miles off the surface of the moon, and come back and land off of San Diego here. It's about a 9-day mission, one of those days being in high Earth orbit and the other 8 out to the moon to make some observations and test all of the equipment that we need for subsequent lunar missions. These are the 4 astronauts who are going to be going on that mission, 4 of my colleagues and friends. One Canadian, Jeremy Hansen, on the left, Christina Cook in the middle, and then Victor Glover and Commander Reed Weissman on the far right. They're wearing survival suits developed in harmony with the Orion capsule. They themselves the suits are a system that we've done extensive testing and development on. But has some legacy elements as well. Some of these connectors might look familiar to those that followed the Apollo missions. And they're going to spend those 9 days inside this capsule. You can see it's a little bit cramped. This volume space here does not even show all of the cargo and science experiments they're going to have with them. But it's going to be a really exciting mission when we burn to go back to the moon. And so I have plenty more pictures to share, but I want to stop and take some questions. And if there's a picture that helps answer a question, I'm happy to share it.
Very good. Let's start out with a couple of questions that I missed. Carl Brown, you had another question about space.
Yeah, I'm just curious how often the ISS has to change its velocity, do some kind of a thrust or something like that to avoid a debris impact.
Yes. Well, it probably depends on how calibrated you are to frequency. There is a lot of trash in low Earth orbit. There's just a lot of debris. And there's also a lot of functional satellites, with every Starlink launch puts a lot more objects up in a shared space that ISS has to traverse through. So we perform a couple of different types of maneuvers. either a sort of a planned reboost of station where we'll fire the aft thrusters to increase our velocity, raise our orbit. Or we may do a smaller version of that or a retrograde burn to do a planned debris avoidance maneuver called a PDAM. I'm going to misquote the frequency because I'm not entirely sure, but it's on the order of a couple months, perhaps. We have an entire console team that's dedicated to looking at those potential conflicts, prescribing a probability of same place, same time to them, and then we execute any actions as required as that probability gets more and more a higher and higher confidence.
Thank you.
Yeah, great question.
Okay. Jim, you had a question. You had a couple of questions, but I'll let you ask one. I'm gonna let you pick this one. Go ahead.
Yeah, Chris, so what's a typical day? Like what are you gonna do when you wake up tomorrow morning?
Tomorrow morning, I am going to go fly in the T-38. I've been wanting to work on my aerobatics, and so I plan to go there's a warning area out over the Cape, and I plan to go, in the 5G range. I'll do a couple loops, a couple of maneuvers. That's the start of my day. I'll go to a couple of briefings on some recent lessons learned, and I am working on some crew procedures for Artemis 2 because I will be the capsule communicator when we burn TLI, when we go to the moon.
Right.
Yeah, that's tomorrow.
I have a quick follow-up for you. I would imagine that, extended time in space, can be a little bit lonely and challenging psychologically, right? So is that part of your training, and can you speak about that a little bit?
Yeah, the psychological challenge of long duration spaceflight is both something we select resilience towards and also train resilience towards. And so a lot of what we look for in a good fit for the astronaut corps is your ability to do well on small teams in austere environments. So I didn't share, but I have a lot of experience in the backcountry, backpacking, whitewater rafting. And so that is an area that I'm really comfortable with. And so we actually will go and train. We do a kind of a miniature National Outdoor Leadership course with the Knowles group. And we'll take crews out there and work on our crew cohesion, work on team dynamics, work on communication under the stress of not having a good night's sleep for a week, being a little hungry, being a little cold, to try and simulate a little bit of the challenges of being so removed from home for so long.
Okay. Cynthia, you have a question?
Yeah, I had a question thinking about the neutral buoyancy lab is really cool. My background is I did a lot of scientific diving and scuba diving for my research. And so I'm just thinking about I trained scuba diving for doing scuba diving, but you're training in a water environment, which is high pressure and much more viscous than something like space, which could be complete opposite. So I'm just curious, besides the neutral buoyancy aspect, are there aspects that you just cannot prepare for being out in space?
Fabulous observation. Yes. There are some things that are small that we can somewhat, some deltas that are small, we can somewhat mitigate with the help of our safety divers. Anytime I'm in the spacesuit, I have two divers that are dedicated to, making sure that they can help me out of the suit in an off-nominal situation. And also to make it as space-like as possible. One of those things that I will often brief is I'll request when I start moving, I change my plane and I'm going to translate along the edge of the truss to mimic more space-like forces, push me and make me stop to resist the force. Because really, if I give one pull in space, I should be able to coast to where I want to go. Obviously, we don't do that for safety reasons. I like to have a hand-on structure at all times. But you ask them to follow our laws of motion, and please keep me in motion until I stop. Other things is the weight of the tools we train in. Space qualified hardware tends to be quite engineered, over engineered perhaps, because it has to see and survive and do its job in a tough environment. But so then we end up with a socket driver that weighs 35 pounds on Earth, and I'm trying to hold it in my little T-Rex hands underwater on my back with really bad grip because my suit is now pressurized to about 4.3 psi. And every time I want to grip something, I'm doing a forearm workout. And man, at the end of a run, it is the hardest thing you've ever done to hold that 35-pound socket driver above your head. And so I can ask them, hey, divers for EV1, please offload my PGT for 1 GFX.
Okay.
The thing you can't train for is when you open the hatch and you are looking straight down at the Earth whizzing by you. Everyone who's gone out that door describes it as an initial sense of falling, just the visual illusions, and you don't have your vestibular system to ground you. And so you have to take a beat, make your world real small, focus on a handrail, and let your thinking brain catch up with the experience, that ground rush that you see. We can't train for that in the pool.
Okay, we've got one more question, and then I may jump in with a one or two that I've been holding back on mine. Where are we? Fred Khalil, you got a question? Oh, what is your favorite experiment done on the ISS?
Ooh, I'm awfully partial to the ones that are done on the astronauts themselves. So we take all sorts of biological fluid samples over the course of a mission, looking for changes in protein expression, RNA expression, things like that. And so I think that open-ended question of what's happening to the human body when you remove gravity, that's probably my favorite question.
Okay. And okay, I get to do this. First of all, I wanted to put in a plug for Spot the Space Station. If nobody's tried it, it's really quite something. The space station is brighter than the brightest star. And I look at it and I think about exactly what you do. There are souls up there. I watch it whenever, and it's seldom clear enough around here, but whenever it is, I'm out there. So the Spot the Space Station will let you see it. But my question is, when is your mission?
So whenever I'm assigned, which I'm hopeful will be soon, we have about 18 months of training that is mission specific for the experiments we might be doing, for the state of station, the ops we're doing at the time. And so it would be 18 months after that.
So it hasn't been scheduled.
No, not yet.
Or we can write our congressman or something. I don't know. Okay, but I'm going to squeeze
yeah, I'm
okay.
really excited. I'm ready. As soon as I hear something, I'll let you guys know.
Okay, I'm waiting for Jim to pull the plug on me. We're running just about when he said he was going to.
Yeah.
So
you get 2 more questions, Bob, and then we'll wrap.
Oh, I missed them. Okay, they're coming in fast. You mean okay, Silky?
Okay, hi. I just read a very interesting book called, I can't remember the name of it, but it's about should we colonize space? Can we and should we? And there's a lot of very, let's say, thought-provoking commentary on, what a unnatural environment it is, for humans. And there's really it sounds like it'd be very difficult to, to deal with the effects of low gravity, radiation, and everything else that you can imagine. And then to contemplate, a 2-year flight to Mars, and then whatever length of time, people are going to spend there and then return. Do you think this is even feasible, really, despite what Elon Musk says?
Yeah, I'm curious what this book is. If you remember it, pass it on to Jim and he can tell me. There's a lot of elements. At the core, I do believe it's possible. I think we as a species are really good at building tools and solving problems. We need to focus on this difficult problem, and skill up a little bit. The problem of Mars is, you hit it on the head, is it is a long time, and it's not just, radiation for sure, that's a huge one. But it's a logistics problem as well. How are we going to feed people? How do you provide resources for the inevitable failures of hardware, equipment, etc.? But those are ultimately solvable problems. Maybe, like the science fiction nerd in me, with my bioengineering background, is thinking, CRISPR, I can turn on some DNA damage repair machinery in the face of an elevated radiation background. Obviously, that is just an idea, but that's the kind of questions we can start looking into to say, what do we need to do to make that happen? One is maybe getting us more robust, getting our food more robust, logistics, but also getting there faster. Can we use a different type of propulsion to get us there faster? So I am an optimist. I do believe that we will get there. I think we have a lot of work ahead of us. And then a little bit to your point about the ethics of colonizing the solar system. I think our ethics conversations haven't caught up yet to our ability. We sent people to the moon with no consideration for being stewards of our satellite. So we left a lot of trash. The different, that was a very early demonstration of our abilities. And I think we're taking a different approach now as we're thinking about returning to the moon, preserving the moon for what it is, not bringing a bunch of microorganisms with us, so that we can accurately learn about what we find there. And the same thing would be true for Mars. And I think that those are really important conversations that will continue happening, about being better stewards of this place that we live in, especially as we expand further and further.
Okay, I'm going to try and squeeze in 2 quick ones. This is from Carl Brown, but rather than having him, I'm just going to read it. On a personal note, what's your favorite space-related movie?
Yeah, I've got the professional answer and then the embarrassing answer. And the professional answer is Interstellar, which is beautiful, and I absolutely love the soundtrack. I listen to that when I fly on just commercial planes. It's very relaxing. And then the somewhat embarrassing answer is The Martian, because very rarely is the squishy scientist the savior of the space story. Despite all of its inaccuracies, I find it to be a very beautiful and very fun movie.
And finally, from Ariana, I'm not sure I'm getting pronounced right, not Singh, but as a high schooler, when you were in high school, what was your favorite subject?
I had a problem in high school that I enjoyed too many things, and so I was trying to take art classes, computer programming, math, biology. I couldn't take geology because I ran out of time slots in the day. So really, I think I'm a lover of learning, and just having to choose is sometimes hard.